conference like Project Catalyst is being efficient and effective. That is, choosing the right goals and executing in the best possible manner with the least waste. You can't be sure you're doing that without some number crunching. But here's the thing, and I guess some of you out there are saying, oh, gee, I don't like numbers, I don't want to do that, I want to get out on my farm. But here's the thing, numbers are not about numbers themselves, they're about a story. It's about producing a concise story in a way that you can measure, that others, yourself and others will understand. And if you can do that, you're well on the way to developing yourself a real business rather than just a hobby. If you do it properly, you'll get better results, relieve stress, and ultimately benefit the reef. There's a photo of me on the dryland farm, and there's some picture of numbers that I should have put up when I talked about numbers. But I just wanted to show you just a few excerpts from a model we built for this particular farmer, just to show you some of the things that we thought about. And the point of this is to show that we're translating things that happen on his farm, or the family's farm, into a story, but it's a story told in Excel where one thing leads to another. And if you go through it in a disciplined manner, it gets your own thought processes going in a way that you can say, okay, I understand when I did that, it led to this, and I can quantify it. Well, that's critical. So on this first page, I just want to see, does that work? Perhaps it doesn't matter. No, just, is that the pointer? No. That's all right then. Right. Thank you very much. Okay, so good, right, fantastic. So up here, we've got the application rates for the different chemicals and fertilisers that go into the different crops. So we've got the crops down here. So what I'm trying to show here is that this is the real world. This isn't just having some guess at, theoretically, a theory. This is the real world. So we've got real crops there that are actually planted on this land, and in here, different application rates of chemicals and fertilisers. And then in this panel down here, we have the application frequencies for each of those chemicals and fertilisers. Oops. Then we go on to looking at the costs of the different chemicals, and you can see how they're spread across 3 years, but as we build up the data set, can continue on forever. We've got the costs of the seed that go in, the costs of the fertiliser, the costs of the contractors that are used to either weed or harvest on the different blocks of land, and then of course the cost of fuel. Then we look at all of the different paddocks on this farmer's land, and we look at how they're going to be planted. What's the plan for planting over the next few years? And remember, we had the application rates and the chemicals and fertilisers, and you can see that the actual paddocks are down there. So again, it's not theoretical. This is a real farm. And you'll have similar names. He's got all their family favourite names that have been set up over several generations. You can build the same sort of thing. Now, once you've got all those things together, what you're going to plant, the input costs, the expected crop yields, the chemical application rates, the application rates for fertilisers, and the different other costs that come in, you can actually calculate an estimate of gross profit for each block of land that you've got. Well, to me, that's where it starts getting really interesting, because that means that you can make decisions on or make judgments on how you're going to apply or how much fertiliser you're going to apply, how much chemical you're going to apply to which blocks of land, what you're going to plant there, coming down, so it actually flows through to a real profit number. And as I said earlier, profit is really the only thing that counts. If you're not making a profit, you really don't have a business. So you've got to be focused on that bottom line, and it's the proper and efficient, effective application of all the inputs that allows us to get to the best profit that you can get from the land that you have. Now, if you do that consistently, you'll end up with a data set that actually tells you something. 10 years, 20 years, you'll end up with an amazing data set which will actually be one of the most valuable tools in your toolkit. Now, there's another way of looking at this, which moves a little bit away from the looking at the numbers and looks at some practical things that you can do to improve the profitability of your farm. And what this talks to is some of the things that stop, sometimes our own thoughts or thought processes stop us from progressing on a path that we really should be progressing on. And one of those things is, oh wow, how am I ever going to find $200,000 for a new piece of kit, or to improve the viability of my land? So a $200,000 problem mightn't be too big for some of you, but it would be massive for others. But whatever the size, there's a size that would worry you. Now, I know, for example, in Cane, that one of the big concerns is the cost of electricity. Right across the industry, particularly for those that are irrigated, the cost of electricity has become really prohibitive, because in irrigation, not only do you have to pay for the water, but you also have to pay to pump it out. Now, that slide just shows some of the comments that were made at a meeting that addressed this. Now, the thing is, you can think about, oh, electricity's going up, what am I going to do about it? It's affecting the viability of my land. And you know that saving the reef, you know that saving the reef's good for your industry because it engenders community support, and by that, you know it's good for you. But let's say you've already done everything you can with regard to soil and nutrients. Well, maybe there are other things that you can do, but what about if there are things that you've overlooked, little things that are going to improve your viability and efficacy and allow you to operate in a more overall efficient sense? Or to put it more bluntly, how do you save some money to invest in other initiatives? Well, I'd say that one thing that you can think about doing if electricity is a problem for you, and it is for many people, is think about putting solar in. Now, there's lots of discussion about solar, and it's expensive, or it doesn't work very well, or whatever. Well, we've got some experience in this, and solar does work very well, and it can save you significant amounts of money. If you look at, say, a $100,000 electricity bill, installing solar at no capital cost to yourself can save you between 8 and 15%. So if you've got a $100,000 electricity bill, that's between $8,000 and $15,000 a year you can save. Now, getting back to this large problem, this $200,000 a year problem, $8,000 or $15,000 doesn't sound like a lot. But what if that $8,000 or $15,000 can be applied to interest, such that you can afford to borrow the money to invest in the bigger project? So you can save a small amount of money in a particular endeavour, i.e. reducing your electricity bill, and apply that saving to something much, much bigger by leveraging the effect of the savings. So the $15,000 can support perhaps $170,000 in additional debt, provided you've got a sensible business case for it. And if you do that, then not only have you got the electricity saving and benefited the reef, then you're able to apply other initiatives that might include row spacing initiatives or new equipment, or all sorts of things that you need to do on your farm. So with just that one initiative, you're freeing up a lot of capital by leveraging the effect of that single modest initiative. And those savings, that 8 to 15%, they're magnified. If you're applying it to an off-grid application, so for example, if you've got a pump that's running on mains power at the moment, and then you can take that off-grid and put in, a standalone solar array, then you're going to save a lot more than that. But that 8 to 15% is the sort of saving that you'll get if you're just moving over to solar. Now, of course, the saving is also higher if you financed it yourself completely, but the point of this message was to say that there are modest things that you can do, that the benefits of which you can leverage to do bigger ticket items. But solar in any form is almost certainly going to save you money. So something to think of here is that, and that we all need to keep in mind, is that Rome wasn't built in a day. Now, people like to say that, but I think there's, another thing to relate to it, and that is it would never have been built at all if someone hadn't moved the first brick. So you can sit there saying, I've got these big problems, I've got the $200,000 problem, but maybe there's just some small things you can do to start moving towards that larger goal by freeing up a modest amount of cash. So further to that, I want to talk about how people look at an activity like farming, and how in any business we think about these sorts of problems that we might have, the investment that we might have to make to achieve some greater goal. This is a timeline of a product that you would know well, Suscon Blue. Some of you would know that Suscon wasn't actually a new chemical at all. It was an Australian application of an existing chemical technology. So that single Australian innovation formed the basis of a product that ended up having a lifespan of, well, to date, 38 years, over which it's been adapted and that its efficacy expanded. Well, the message I want to get across here is time frames are long in cane. So just because you want to have something next week or within a month, it really isn't of much consequence. CropCare saw the benefit of this product and has stewarded it through a period of 38 years. Well, I think that if the chemical company thinks that way, perhaps the operators of the farms need to too. So that's, again, why we need to look at using these incremental gains and benefit from incremental gains and applying them elsewhere so that we get the maximum benefit and ultimately build our own Rome. So to finish off this section, before we talk a little bit about succession planning, I just want to make the following points. Your farm is a business. You need to treat it like one and enjoy the process and the perspective, and that really means getting down and dirty with things that might not be your natural inclination. The numbers, which might be one of those things, are your friend. Even if they're not your natural habitat, others, ourselves and other people who I've seen advertising around this room, can help you understand them. It doesn't get you off the hook from getting down and dirty and really getting involved, but if you do that, you will end up with a much better result and you'll actually know where you're going. The best path is not always the most obvious one. So again, looking at the big problem, there might be a number of smaller steps to get to before you get to the bigger, that allow you to deal with the bigger problem. So magnify, capture small gains, do what you can, capture small gains and then invest them elsewhere. If you keep doing that, as I said, you will have built your Rome. If you do all that, then you'll be tending your soil, managing your nutrients, and through that protecting the reef. Now, I was asked to add something on about succession planning. So what I thought I'd do is, rather than give you a lecture, I'm sure you've heard all this stuff before about succession planning and how we all should do it. It's very important. Everyone's getting older and you've got to pass stuff on to the younger generation. I just thought I'd tell you a real story to highlight some of this. So this story concerns a farming operation where 4 brothers ran a debt-free farm, about 20,000 acres, sent their children to private schools every year, or obviously every year until they were grown up, went on overseas holidays every year, like formal ones, not just, oh, we're going to have a bit of a look, like really significant overseas holidays. And they hadn't had a crop failure since 1995. Now, as time went on, 2 of the boys, and this farm had been in the family since about just after the First World War. It had been passed down through the generations. So 2 of the sons got married. Well, sorry, 3 of the sons got married. But one of the wives came from out of town and there was a falling out. I won't go into that, but there was a falling out. That led to an informal meeting in the paddock of 4 brothers where one decided he wouldn't be part of the team anymore. So unannounced, he just rolled up and said, guys, look, some issues going on here. I'm leaving. And I thought that horse picture was good because that is clearly one horse there that doesn't want to be there. So they came to a handshake agreement in the paddock about what they were going to do. And to that point, it was a bit tense, but you'd say amiable. You know, it was okay. It was a bit tense, but here's what we're going to do. Well, I guess in their minds, they thought that their wives were at home looking after the kids and, feeding them and just doing what, diligent mothers do, looking after the house and, all those traditional things that people might think of, in a long-established farming family. Well, this was okay until the boys went home and spoke to their respective wives about what they'd decided. It didn't go down all that well. So when they got reconvened, when the brothers reconvened, no one was in a happy place, and we moved from animal metaphors to actually what really happened. It wasn't a pleasant thing at all. Now, through that process, I became involved, and I'm, out of these 4 families, I'm pretty close to one of them, have been for many years, and I got involved to try and help sort things out. Now, before long, I ended up, and although I was proud of my efforts, I can't say it was the most pleasant thing I ever did. In fact, far from it. These are the people that ended up being involved in this project, this is over 2 years ago this all started, is only just starting to wind up now. So you've got an accountant, Rabobank, Landmark, a group that does insurance and finds farm loans, business loans. Another set of lawyers, us, another set of accountants, valuers, another set of lawyers, a set of corporate lawyers, the Commonwealth Bank, and the prime one, the New South Wales Police, who actually took out a restraining order on one of the families. Now, all that happened because there was no contract agreed in the paddock. It was just a handshake. It was a he said, she said sort of arrangement. Nothing was discussed with the wives in the beginning. And although things had been simmering for years, no one actually brought it to the table and said, look, we've got a problem here, we need to deal with it, let's get some mediation or some help. None of that was done, even though it was clear, when you speak to them now, it was clear for many years that issues had been brewing. Now, when I said that the problem was caused by, the problem sort of happened when one of the fellows married a woman from outside. This goes back to years. It wasn't like they had just got married. The woman from out of town had come in, and they were all perfectly nice, but these simmering attitudes towards each other, had built up and been simmering until they came to a head. And that's what it led to. Now, just to finish up, I told you at the beginning that this farming enterprise was debt-free. Just to reiterate, debt-free. All their children went to private schools, formal overseas holidays every year, and no crop failure since '95. Now, to date, since that split all happened, they've spent hundreds of thousands on consultants. They lost all their tax concessions that normally would have been available to small business. In fact, in addition to that, they had to pay $200,000 tax. They had to deal with all those people and pay them. That's so $200,000 on consultants, as I said. And mind you, it had to all be done quickly. Like, all those people probably would, well, perhaps not the police, but all those people would have had to been dealt with, but they could have been dealt with in a sensible way over a period of time, in a structured way. It would have cost a lot less, and they would have had a much happier outcome. There would have been time to rejig the way the farm was structured and to gain tax concessions, all that. But because the atomic bomb had been set off, there was no going back. So, as I said, hundreds of thousands on consultants. They lost all their tax concessions and had to pay actually $200,000 in tax. They ended up with over $2 million worth of debt because of the way the farm had to be restructured. The land area for each family ended up being only just viable. Each brother, rather than working together, like 4 of them working together and each having a specialist sort of area or direction for how they went about their work, had to fend for themselves, so they had to become a jack of all trades across the whole farm. They had 2 crop failures in 3 years. And you can imagine the massive angst and stress that went all that, the effects of which I won't go into. So when we look at that, I think you've got to take it, that's a salutary lesson. Like, it's one thing for me to stand up here and say, oh, look, succession planning is a sensible thing to do. You must go and do it. You're going to have to pass it on one day. I just want to point out to you real life effects of what happens if you don't. And you might say, oh, well, I can work around that. We're all happy in our family and all that. You wait until decisions really have to be made, until there's real money on the table and outsiders come in because people decide to get married or children decide that they don't actually want to pursue the farming lifestyle or whatever. These are things that need to be addressed early, and time is the greatest tool that you've got to get a really sensible outcome from it. If you leave it till the last minute, you won't have time, and in that, you've gotten rid of your biggest ally. Well, with that, I'll thank you for having me and leave you to ponder those points. Thank you.
Did anybody have any questions they wanted to ask David? I've just got a little bit of extra time. Yes? Just one sec.
Yeah, sure. That's right, no? David, is it possible to get a copy of your slides that you put up?
With the horse?
No. Got one of those. No, your actual, your breakdown of your farming structure.
Oh, the model?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, I can give you a copy of that. It's like, fine.
Yeah, I like numbers too.
Yeah, do you? Does everyone in your family like numbers? Or is it a process of education?
We're all pretty diversified. You're talking to a lawyer, a doctor, a pharmacist, an engineer, and a jack of all trades.
Oh, well, good.
Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, with the example you showed earlier with the future prices that were projected for that wheat and sorghum farmer, what did you base the price on for the forward crops?
So there's forward, obviously there's estimates out there and there's futures markets, and then there's also the gut, the sort of gut feel average of what the farmer says. And it's easy to criticise these models. I'm not saying you are, but I'm just saying it's very easy to say, oh, well, we never know what the price is going to be in the future, and so why do we bother doing this? Well, I put it to you that that's not an excuse. You want to know where you are if something happens the way you think it's going to happen. So if you think something is going to be $200 a tonne, then you know where your farm's going to sit if it's $200 a tonne. Well, that on its own is good knowledge, because then if you know that, then if the price is only $150, if real life turns out it's only $150 a tonne, you know how big your problem is, and you know it before that problem's happened. So if you're sitting there expecting or hoping, whichever way you want to look at it, for a price of $200 a tonne, and then you realise that it's going to be $50 a tonne short by the time the cropping seed, the harvest comes, then you can make arrangements ahead of time, be on the front foot, so that you don't get caught up with a cash flow issue. You can go to the bank and say, look, it's going to be really tight this year, we need to make some arrangements. Well, the bank's going to look on you a lot more credibly if you do it that way and take the initiative, then if you go there and you just wait for it all roll and say, oh well, it wasn't $200 a tonne, it was $150 and it's been a really tough year for the 5th year running. It's about empowering yourself to make judgments about how your business activity is going to look ahead of time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I'd love to join you for a beer later. Thank you.
Great.